Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into the holiday season. I'll be celebrating 30 years on Baltimore radio next Monday, but I'm actually going to be celebrating this Thursday at the Beaumont in Catonsville, which is why I'm wearing the State Fair shirt. I do have an El Guapo shirt. I know Don Muller was very jealous about that, but I do not have a Beaumont shirt. I'm looking forward to like a big old chop on Thursday night out there at the Beaumont. So we're looking forward to it. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. We're going to let ourselves play at the Beaumont on Thursday, and then next Wednesday, the 15th, we'll be at Costas. I think that's our final appearance, at least before the holidays. Got some stuff lined up at Nacho Mama's and some other places for early parts of 2022. Which leads us to Luke Jones right now, who spent the evening on Sunday night driving down the mountain. No Marlon Humphrey, the Lamar Jackson 7-sack effort, the two-pointer that tipped away, the analytics analyzing all of the whys and wherefores of depleted secondary. It's sort of rearview mirror, right? Like if you would have said they were going to be 8-4, you'd be like, okay. If you would have said they're going to lose in Pittsburgh, you'd be like, okay, they probably lose in Pittsburgh. But if you were to say that, the tip or the fingertips and Mark Andrews, you come that close to being 9-3. You come back home now and you assess what's out there. And I love that Josh Bynes talks quartiles and this is a quarter of the season and a quarter of the season. I mean, he is like a coach, as you said, in the aftermath of all of this. But here we are, right? It's Cleveland. It's Green Bay. It's going to Cincinnati for Christmas week, keeping the focus around on all of that. Then the Rams. I mean, every week is going to be its own little attrition thing here for any of these playoff teams that are 6-7, 7-6. I mean, the whole league's up for grabs right now. You're 2 weeks away from burping and knocking yourself out of the playoffs, and these might be the 2 weeks. And the Ravens bought themselves some rope here, but you can't lose to Pittsburgh and lose to Cleveland and think you're going to go out to Cincinnati. I mean, they're all of a sudden in need of a victory.
Yeah, I think if for no other reason, you just want to start playing better. I mean, even in these wins, I mean, we've talked about it since that Chargers game where we thought that, all right, running game looks really good. Defense was awesome, made Justin Herbert look so bad. The offense scores 34 points, and you're thinking, all right, here you go. You're 5-1. You're getting rolling. It's looking a lot like 2 years ago. And since then, it's just been, I mean, okay, the blowout loss to the Bengals aside, all these other games have just been an absolute slog, a grind. And they just, from an eyeball test standpoint, I know ultimately wins and losses. They're 8-4. As you mentioned, you look at the record in isolation, 12 games in, especially if we go down the IR list right now, if we wanted to, it looks a lot better, right? It feels a lot better. But when you watch these games on a weekly basis and you see the issues that they have on either side of the ball, that's where you do look at this and say, well, you know what? I mean, they beat Minnesota in overtime, and the Vikings look really good at times, but they're the Vikings. And I mean, say no more after what happened to them on Sunday when looking at who they lost to, who no one else had lost to this year. But you lose to Miami, okay, short week. And look, you can come up with an excuse or an explanation or a rationale for any of these games. And it's a week-to-week league. We know that. But it's been a really long time, Nestor, since the Ravens have played at a really high level. Meaning from the beginning of the game to end where you win by multiple scores and you have a comfortable fourth quarter. I mean, it's been since mid-October that's happened.
Well, since they've looked like a playoff team, like a capable team that's going to string together wins against a quality opponent in tough circumstances at the end of the year where you knew they'd be depleted. You just didn't know it'd be Marlon Humphrey kind of depleted. They could talk all they want that Ronnie Stanley was coming back and Nick Boyle was coming back and, ifs and buts and candies and nuts and, the defensive lineman Wolf that we've, long since forgotten about, right? And Jimmy Smith to some degree, who was sort of out there running around, and they don't have any confidence in him. I mean, he's clearly a diminished player. I mean, you talk about Roethlisberger being diminished. Harbaugh takes the podium in front of you guys after the game and says, I had no corners. Well, what's going to change in the next 5 days, Luke, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they should get Chris Westry back. but he's Chris Westry. He's a second-year corner. I like him. We talked about him, and it's always easier to talk about some of these guys. And we mentioned in our previous segment talking about those what-if scenarios and talking about your plans in March and April and thinking about the draft and looking at OTAs and training camp and trying to find those nuggets, right? Those diamonds in the rough.
This is the Mike Tyson. This is what happens after you get punched, right?
Yeah, well, or in this case, when you hurt yourself trying to get into the ring. I mean, that's where the Ravens have been with these injuries. And I'm not trying to make light of it, to be very clear. I mean, these injuries have really, it stinks. It's awful that it happens. And yeah, we can, people will ask about the training staff and, all these different variables that go into it. And they should ask those questions. I'm not being accusatory. It's just, they need to ask those questions. They need to take a long look at that after a season like this, where they've had the volume of injuries that they've had. But you're right. In the meantime, you still got to play. You still want to try to make the most out of this season that you can, even if deep down you're wondering, it might not be our year. We talked about that before week 1 with the guys they lost. So, in this case with losing Marlon Humphrey, it is tough when you look at this. And I even got the question on Twitter early Monday morning as I kind of broke down what the snap counts were and noting that Tavon Young clearly wasn't right and didn't play a whole lot, but you assume he'll bounce back and he'll be better and be ready to go and play in full time again come this week. But, I don't think, and you alluded to it, I think it's evident with how they've handled them this year. I don't think the Ravens believe Jimmy Smith is an every down guy now. Now, that said, that doesn't mean he can't play and contribute, but it's probably going to be more Chris Westry and Jimmy Smith worked in there a little bit as well.
What speaks to where Harbaugh was after the game, because he thinks the players are in there with glass up to the wall listening to the press conferences. I mean, he believes that he would say we didn't have any corners in overtime. That's sort of saying, I mean, no offense to any of these guys, they are breathing and they are paid professionals. Even if they were signed on the practice squad this week, it would let you know where the confidence level was that the 2-point play. And as bad as we feel about all these injuries and all this stuff, to Josh Bynes' point, if Lamar lowers the ball and makes a better throw, and we're 9-3 and whistling to Cleveland right now, and all of this is just what it's been the last couple of weeks, was just sort of collateral damage after another victory.
Well, but that's also why you do need to look at the entire picture and not just the end result, right? I mean, that you have to look at your issues. You have to acknowledge what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. And we've talked about that. And there's a lot to fix. I mean, as much as we've talked a lot about the defense because of what happened in the fourth quarter, I mean, the defense played very well over 3 quarters. They gave up 3 points. Now, they were fortunate. I mean, you look at Ben Roethlisberger threw probably the best pass he's thrown in the last 3 years, and Deontay Johnson can't make the over-the-shoulder catch late in the first half. So, you look at that was, that could have been worse. So you can go through all these what ifs. If Lamar doesn't throw the pick on the opening drive, I mean, there's always that butterfly effect. And heck, Chris Boswell missed an extra point. If he makes that extra point, how does the rest of the game play out in terms of these decisions to go for 2 or not?
Would have been different in the game.
Right. I mean, I mean, as much as you pin it on one play, and you're right, if Lamar Jackson can make a better throw, if TJ Watt doesn't get the kind of push that he does, if Mark Andrews can make a one-handed catch, we've seen Mark Andrews make plenty of one-handed catches. I mean, that was a soft pass where he could have made it. I'm not saying he should have. He could have made the catch. We are talking about this with a different tone, but this is why you and I and why I point out things like their point differential and DVOA or expected, their EPA per play, all those different things, which are they're nerdy stats. I get that. And ultimately W's and L's are what matter. Everyone understands that, but it's still that matter of being predictive. What do all these numbers mean for this team moving forward? And that's why I said to you, the first thing I said when we started breaking this one down was it felt like a market correction, not in terms of another injury. I mean, my goodness. I mean, that, as much as we can talk about the Ravens having some in-game play-to-play good fortune at a few different points this year. I mean, a 66-yard field goal. Well, remember the delay of game that wasn't called right before that. So they've had some things that have bounced their way in game. In the big picture with the injuries, they have not had, I mean, they've had no luck. It's been rotten luck. So, but if you're trying to be predictive, if you're trying to anticipate what this team's going to be moving forward, And this brings us back to looking at the rest of the schedule. It's difficult to envision anything but an absolute slog the rest of the way. And look, I think they're going to compete. As much as we can talk about them not blowing teams out, they've been blown out once this year. It's not as though it's happened 3 or 4 times, like you could say even about some playoff contenders. I mean, we've talked about a team like Buffalo where they've looked really good or they've looked god awful at times. The Ravens, I think I don't know if I'd say it's reassuring, but they've actually been fairly consistent from the context of since that Chargers game. They've kind of played like a middling team since then. It's just in all these games until Sunday, they had found a way to make one more play, right? I mean, they had been able to pull it out. They didn't do it on Sunday. And again, you kind of get to market correction, regression to the mean, well, whatever nerdy term you want to use. It kind of caught up to them on Sunday. And that's not to say that's going to, because they won 6 straight one score games, that they're now going to lose every 1 score game. But you do know that that's a pretty crazy run. And it's a big reason why they're 8-4. But at the same time, they are 8-4. They do have some cushion in the division. It's not much, but you do look at the remaining schedule for the Bengals with their youth and their inexperience. And as good as they look at times, they also look really bad at times. Pittsburgh and Cleveland, I mean, mathematically, they're still a possibility, but do either of those teams have the moxie, the talent at this point, the ability at this point to really win the required number of games to win this division? I don't think so. I'm not a believer in them in that way. That's why I still give the Ravens the edge, even if that doesn't necessarily translate to me anticipating a long, deep run into the postseason. But each of these games, let's face it, they're very capable of losing all 5 of these games. I think they're capable of winning all 5, but at the same time, it's been a while since they've played a team like the Green Bay Packers. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. The Rams, the Rams team earlier in the season, I would say, oh, that doesn't look so good. Rams haven't played very good football, since they went quote all in with Odell Beckham. So, I mean, they're playing some. I mean, these are winnable games, no question about it. And games, a couple of these games they certainly should win. I don't think they're going to go 0-5. I don't think they're going to collapse. But at the same time, looking for signs that they're going to go on this. Even forget about 2 years ago. Look at what they did at the end of last year, winning 5 in a row after the COVID game in Pittsburgh. Just not seeing signs that they're going to be able to do that. And a big reason why is the injury situation, is the health picture. And I mean, losing Marlon Humphrey, you can't downplay that, because if you do, why are you paying the guy all that money? I say that all the time. There's next man up when you're talking about average starters or backups, guys of that nature. Certain positions you can say next man up, but when you're talking about a number 1 corner, and even if he hasn't been the best version of himself this year, he's still the best corner they have, but very clearly. So when you lose that guy, when you already lost Marcus Peters a few months ago, that's a sobering thought when you still have Green Bay coming to town. You have to go to Cincinnati. The weapons the Rams have, and well, I mean, you saw what Pittsburgh did to them in the 4th quarter on Sunday, and that was with Marlon Humphrey until the very end. So they've got work to do, and I don't know if they're going to find solutions for all of their problems at this point, and that's where it is. But the reassuring thing, the comforting thing in acknowledging that is, look at the rest of the AFC. As I said, you like a team, give them a week. The Bengals, we've done this a couple times with them, right? Where they look like they're all of a sudden going to go on this big run, and then they stub their toe big time. So, NFC, maybe that's a different story with how the Cardinals have looked, how the Packers have looked, some of those teams at the very top. But the AFC,
But New England. The Ravens are playing the 2 teams that are probably going to be in the NFC Championship game, right? I mean, they're playing the Rams and the Packers, right? Like, so there's a chance that,
let's not forget Arizona. I mean, Arizona's looked better than both of those teams.
Fair enough.
But I hear you. I hear you.
They're in that conversation, sure. And for their purposes, these last 3 games, one in each place around the division, and the division's all cramped, and they were really on top of it, and they came a 2-pointer away from really sort of putting the Steelers would be done, right? We'd be talking about them like DOA. They're not now. The Browns sitting around not feeling so good about themselves, but waiting for us. And, oh, by the way, if you say, oh, we're going to come in and play without Marlon Humphrey. I think Baker Mayfield would like that. And so
Yeah.
there's going to be that going on. And then you're going to see Cincinnati and Pittsburgh again. You just lost to Pittsburgh, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these division games and like where the Ravens are, I have been working under this foregone conclusion. Silly of me to think the Bengals weren't a playoff team. The Browns were overrated. The Steelers were old and Ben was fat, and he just beat them now yesterday, right? So all of these premise that we have from the offseason are now like, well, we think the Ravens are going to make the playoffs. Well, are they? Well, then that means we think they're really going to beat the Bengals, the Browns, and the Steelers, or some combination thereof, and be knocking these teams out because every one of these losses is sort of colossal. You lose to Cleveland this week, you sit real behind the eight ball, and Cleveland goes from they were in last place, we beat them, to oh my God, look at what's happening. We don't have Marlon Humphrey, and here comes Aaron Rodgers. Merry Christmas. So, this thing could get off the rails really, really quickly, even at 8-3. And I spent all last week talking about the Steelers being 11-0 and how it got off the rails. I think it's a lot more off the rails when you're playing all division games all the time at the worst time in the year, kind of sort of for you. I mean, we're all in agreement the team looks like ish right now. I mean, along all facets of it, right? This isn't a good. If I'm writing Purple Rain 3 in 8 weeks and you and I are in LA wearing purple beads and masks off and having fun with Billy Crystal and, hanging out with the superstars, if that happens, this would be the Flacco Plank turning point, kind of sort of, yeah, you're 7-4 good, 8-3 good, 8-4 wherever you are, but like you're not winning 3-4 games in January against playoff teams like this. And you're going to be seeing these sort of, I don't want to say bum teams because I don't know what Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh are. But we somehow think we're better than them, right? We're losing to them.
Yeah, and that's the interesting point. I mean, everything you said, look, I still don't think the Browns are good. I still don't think the Steelers are very good. Cincinnati, no, wait, hold on. Cincinnati, Sunday's loss notwithstanding, I think has at least proven that they're a playoff contender, unlike what we thought at the beginning of the year. But this is where we come to the Ravens and say, all right, but this is also an acknowledgement now that, yes, they are 8-4, and yes, those wins are banked. So that does give them an advantage here over these final 5 weeks. But that is where you need to call a spade and say, just how good are the Ravens? I think they're pretty good. I mean, relative to looking around the rest of the AFC, they're pretty good. Yeah. I mean, this conversation we're having right now, just about every contender in the AFC has had at least at some point this season. I mean, look, think about how fortunes have changed for the Chiefs now with 5 straight wins. I mean, think about when they were 3-4. I mean, everything was on fire there, right? I mean, and you're talking about a team that's been to the Super Bowl the last 2 years, but you go down the list. I mean, Indianapolis has looked really good at times, and other times they don't look good. And I mean, the Titans looked, a month ago, things looked great for them. And then they lose Derrick Henry and they lose A.J. Brown and they lose all these guys. And, so the saving grace for the Ravens here is that there aren't any superpowers in the AFC. I mean, just look at the standings right now. I mean, you have 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 7-4, 7-5, 7-5 going into Monday Night Football. I mean, that's just, that's where these records are. There is no 10-2. There is no 11-1. And, I hate to keep coming back to that because it makes it sound like it's, a little bit of a cop out and saying, well, the Ravens are fine because everyone else, is kind of just pretty good and no better than that.
January makes you feel like we get into the tournament.
Right. I mean, right now, who can you say with confidence that that's the team that looks like they're going to win 3 or 4 in a row? Kansas City has done it. So you kind of by default have to give them that benefit of the doubt, even though they were 3-4 not that terribly long ago. And now they're 8-4. But that's the thing. I mean, New England's looked really good of late, but they have a rookie quarterback. Let's just slow the roll a little bit there. Let's see what Mac Jones looks like as he's playing more meaningful games. And the same was true when Joe Flacco was a rookie way back when, or Lamar Jackson in his first year as a starter. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's these young quarterbacks who haven't been there before. That's a different animal, even if it's a case where he doesn't need to be the guy because they do have a very complimentary roster. So you don't write the Ravens off with that in mind. At the same time, that doesn't mean that just because no one else is emerging, that it doesn't mean that they're going to be the team that emerges ultimately. And when you look at their deficiencies, you look at their injuries, that's where you do. It does become a little more sobering knowing that, yeah, at the beginning of the year, we thought Ronnie Stanley would come back healthy. You thought Derek Wolfe would be coming back at some point. Nick Boyle has come back, hasn't looked right. Does he look right by January? I don't know. I'm going to guess no at this point based on what we've seen. And I'm not counting them out. It's just looking at the evidence. So you look at all those things. You have a star quarterback who I think by his own admission over the last 4 or 5 weeks hasn't played at that elite level. I mean, he's turned the ball over a lot. It hasn't played very well. Offensive line's not very good. So, defense looks really good at times. You love how the defense plays on third down. I quipped during the game that 3rd and 1 where the Ravens stuffed Pittsburgh. The Ravens, you'd rather have their defense in 3rd and medium than 3rd and 1. They're great 3rd and 1. 3rd and medium is when they miss a tackle in open space or they have a miscommunication in the secondary. So, they have these flaws. And are they going to figure that out in time for these final 5 games to win enough? We'll see. Like I said, they have the edge with this division and with these other teams in the division having their own warts and flaws. But you said it, when you lose a game on Sunday that you really were in control of for a large portion of that game, you come back to the rest of the pack. And now your margin for error has shrunk some. And that's where the Ravens are right now. And they're going to have to figure it out. Because as you mentioned, Cleveland's coming off of a bye week, playing the Ravens back-to-back games. They're going to be healthier than they were playing them last Sunday night. And they're going to be hungry. I mean, we saw what happened in the Monday night game at Cleveland last year. The Ravens blew them out week 1. It looked bad. A couple months later, it was a different story. It was a hell of a football game. So
the Ravens feel vulnerable right now.
They are vulnerable. I mean, how can you not be? I mean, honestly, and John Harbaugh's not going to say that. The players aren't going to say that, but they're very vulnerable. I mean, John admitted it by going for 2 in that scenario. As much as you could point to the analytics, which analytics would say in many instances do that, he admitted they were down. They didn't have their only corner that was left that they could have plugged in. If you're assuming Tavon Young just wasn't capable of playing every snap, because he only played 8 snaps, was Robert Jackson. They signed him to their practice squad on Wednesday. A guy who probably doesn't even know the defense at this point. So that's where they were on Sunday. They'll get Chris Westry back. Tavon Young should be healthier, moving forward, recovering from the non-COVID illness. But you don't have Marlon Humphrey walking through that door. You don't have Marcus Peters, and that's tough. And you have Jimmy Smith, who's age 33, not 28. So it's going to be tough. There's no question about it. And the schedule, we talked about it. That's why it was so important. I said back in May when the schedule came out, I vividly remember saying to you, looking at the front half, the pre-bye portion of the schedule, I said the Ravens better get off to a good start because the second half of that schedule is a bear, and that's without even knowing what their injury picture was going to be. So that's held true. And hey, they're 8-4. Mathematically, that's still a really good place to be, but it's tough when you pull back the curtain to see their many issues. It is tough to really have strong conviction that this team's on the verge of going on a run. It's felt for many weeks now. I even wrote at BaltimorePositive.com a couple of weeks back complimenting them on their survival ability. It really feels more and more every week the way this thing is trending that they're surviving and holding on more so than getting ready to thrive in terms of being able to make that long January run into February.
Hello, Cleveland. Luke Jones will be out in Owings Mills all week long. He'll be doing the Royal Farms thing, real fresh, real fast. Hopefully he's getting some Western fries. I picked up a little bit of Rofo fried chicken the other day. I had a vanilla ice cream need after picking up various apple pies and pastries at Wise over the weekend. So, hey, man, we're going to have a great holiday here. It is my 30th anniversary. I'm going to celebrate accordingly on the 13th. But between now and then, we're going to be at the Beaumont on Thursday doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I'm looking forward to that, and maybe a steak and a cake as well. Also going to be next Wednesday at Costas. We're going to be probably a little crab imperial for me there doing the show, and it's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. Let yourself play. We're scratching off here and scratching and denting as we get closer to the, let's see, Green Bay coming in, then Cincinnati, then we got the Rams, then we got the Steelers. And Luke and I are buckling up our seatbelts, hopefully headed to the Super Bowl out in L.A. in February. Maybe the Ravens will be there, but we got full coverage around here. All of our sports stuff up at BaltimorePositive.com. You can find him at Baltimore Luke. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net all week long, as I probably have some interesting stuff up my sleeve for my 30th anniversary in regard to guests. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking. Baltimore Positive.